modern technologies. Numerous threads of papyrus research come together at Oxford University, where a new procedure to decode the manuscripts has achieved sensational results. Multispectral imaging utilizes the slight differences of light reflected by ink and paper. After 2,000 years, the charred manuscripts from the Villa dei Papiri can be read once again.
Well, the multispectral imaging has completely revolutionized the study of the Herculaneum papyri. It has made it possible for us to see texts that we never thought we would be able to see writing on before, and so read new whole books of Greek literature that never before existed. It has put us light years ahead in the study of the ancient world by increasing the amount of text that we had to read.
And there are perhaps even more literary treasures to be salvaged at Herculaneum. While continuing the excavation, Antonio de Simoni detected even more completely unexplored levels at the villa.
There's a lot of water coming out here. That means there's a room back there which isn't completely filled with volcanic material, so the water is easily able to find its way out.
The scientists hope that there could be even more papyrus scrolls in the buried levels of the Roman villa, which still haven't been explored.
We now know that the residents of Herculaneum wanted to flee to the sea, since we found the papyrus scrolls in boxes along their escape route. We know that there are lower levels that lead to the sea, and we are almost certain that there are further papyri lying down there, packed in boxes. The residents had taken them along to save them in their flight to the sea.
The discovery of further scrolls would be a cultural treasure of the greatest significance.
It's absolutely a race against time. The threat of eruption of Vesuvius is imminent. It's just a matter of the way the wind blows, whether the site is covered, or the Bibliotheca Nazionale, where the existing papyri are covered. So it is absolutely crucial that the investigation be conducted and conducted now.
A fierce quarrel has broken out regarding continuing excavations.
I'm keen to rediscover the lost library of the Villa of the Papyri. Of course, it would be fantastically exciting, but it's not urgent. If there is still material down there, which is quite likely, but not certain, if there is, it will wait for us. It's been waiting a couple of thousand years. It's not going to run away overnight.
Despite all the obstacles and restrictions imposed by the Neapolitans' royal house, Winckelmann does manage to get a glimpse of the excavation sites on the Gulf of Naples in 1758. He observes the unsystematic way the diggers handle the ancient works of art and the deliberate and ruthless exploitation of antiquity. In the end, Winckelmann procures access to the treasures that have been assembled in the palace at Portici since the discovery of Herculaneum in Pompeii. The few scholars allowed to see the collection have been prohibited from making notes or even drawings. Charles III has founded an academy for studying the antiquities and reserved the right to publish reports. Up to that point, only one single volume about the finds has been published, and it is only available through the king himself, who personally hands it to an elect circle of readers. Through bribery, Winckelmann is able to enter the king's most secret gallery, the erotic cabinet. For several months, Winckelmann observes the excavations on the Gulf of Naples. The antiquarian is upset by Alcubierre's ruthlessness. He confides his anger to Father Piaggio. To Winckelmann, it is unbearable to watch the newly discovered legacy of the ancients being ransacked by a man with no regard whatsoever for its true meaning. He calls Alcubierre an incompetent dabbler who has no more feel for his finds than the moon has for a load of crabs. Only Karl Weber, he says, is blessed with a sound mind. Even the padre can't pacify Winckelmann. He is determined to expose the goings-on at the excavation site. Winckelmann decides to launch a frontal attack. At the end of 1762, he publishes his first Letter on the Discoveries at Herculaneum. For the first time, Europe learns details about the buried cities, over half a century after the excavations at Vesuvius began. His scientific report is also an indictment. Winckelmann gives vent to his outrage. He denounces the greed of the royal house and the amateurish way the works of art are handled. He also gives his readers an idea of the intrigues and secrecy surrounding the excavations. The only work that Winckelmann praises is that of Karl Weber. We must thank this wise man for all the good ventures which were later undertaken. Winckelmann describes and arranges the finds in a manner no one before him has ever done. His letter is considered to be the first archaeological report in history.
Winckelmann's letter of 1762 is an enormous step forward, because it's the first time that someone looks at the material that's coming out of Herculaneum systematically. He looks at the literary sources, he looks at the context, he wants to understand what the ancient city was like.
This was the moment where the science of archaeology was born, when the antiquities from Herculaneum were turned from a private collection with private showings into an international databank that could be studied by all scholars, debated, and argued over.
The response to Winckelmann's letter is tremendous. Mount Vesuvius is suddenly hit by an archaeological tourist boom. For Europe's traveling elite, a visit to the excavation site becomes one of the top items on the Grand Tour. One of their favorite destinations is the theater at Herculaneum, still buried today. It is the very place where the first excavations at Vesuvius began. Equipped with torches, the 18th century tourists climb down into the narrow tunnels and take a tour through history, encased in lava. There isn't really much to see, but the empty stage and the deserted tiers give the imagination room to wander. After his visit to the site, Goethe writes, "Many a disaster has happened in the world, but never one that has caused so much joy to posterity as this one. I'm not sure I know of anything more interesting." Every year, millions of tourists come to see the ruins at Vesuvius. To scientists, these rediscovered cities offer important points of reference for excavations throughout the Roman world. A current project is the exploration of Herculaneum's sewer system. Scientists expect to gain new insights into the Roman population's living and eating habits 2,000 years ago by analyzing the deposits. At Oxford University, environmental archaeologist Mark Robinson has specialized in the study of ancient excrement. The find is a godsend for scientists. The legacies which were left behind in the sewers are not only well preserved. Thanks to the volcanic eruption, they can be precisely dated and even, to an extent, assigned to individual buildings.
These are seashells that we found at the very top of the deposit, beneath one of the latrine shafts, and they quite possibly represent one of the last meals, or the last meal, prepared in that kitchen before the eruption.
In addition to the kitchen waste, remains are discovered which wandered through the digestive system of Herculaneans, such as sea urchin quills, fruit pips, or bird claws. Specimens from the scientific collection of his institute helped Mark Robinson to identify the finds.
This is a grain weevil, which was probably a contaminant of the flour they used to make their bread, has been cooked, eaten, entered the sewer, and has been mineralized by the deposition of calcium phosphate, which has preserved it.
Winckelmann, however, remains focused on his vision of antiquity as beautiful and noble. The shoemaker's son finally gains wealth and recognition through his work. Winckelmann's writings especially fire enthusiasm in the German-speaking world for the excavations at Vesuvius and the art of antiquity. With his observations, he captivates the intellectual community of the 18th century and soon receives invitations for exhibitions in Berlin, Dresden, Vienna, and Rome. His writings have a groundbreaking influence on the change in taste from ornate Baroque to classicism. The civilized world is overtaken by a passion for ancient ideals. A new age is dawning in Europe. Architects like Carl Friedrich Schinkel begin using simpler elements of form. A new idea of aesthetics is born. Classical antiquity becomes a guiding principle. The royal house of Naples is disgraced after the publication of Winckelmann's letters. The entire world now focuses on Pompeii and Herculaneum. Officially, Rocco Alcubierre remains in charge of the excavations until his death in 1780. But as a result of Winckelmann's criticism, his name is, even now, connected with the destruction of irreplaceable antiques. Archaeologist Andrew Wallace Hadrill has joined forces with the Italian authorities to secure the future of Herculaneum. At present, the excavations are on hold. The preservation of the ruins has become the utmost priority to prevent a World Heritage Site from being irrevocably destroyed. Not even the last victims of the disaster have been recovered yet, 25 years after the discovery. But Andrew Wallace Hadrill is critical about launching new excavations.
It's good to leave some material for future generations. And for that reason, we need to ration ourselves and not consume more than we need now. It's like consuming a precious resource of the earth that is limited. It will run out. Let's consume it gently, gradually, responsibly.
Winckelmann was only able to view a fraction of the treasures uncovered at Vesuvius. While staying at a hotel in Trieste in 1768, there is a fatal encounter. The man in the room next to his, a convicted criminal, tries to strangle him with a rope. When Winckelmann desperately struggles, the killer stabs him several times and mortally wounds him. Winckelmann dies on June 8, 1768, the rope still around his neck. The reasons for the murder have never been completely resolved. The news of his sudden death shocks the entire civilized world. That he, of all people, the herald of artistic beauty, should fall victim to such a base deed. Lessing writes that he would gladly have given Winckelmann a few years of his own life. And Goethe dedicates his book, Winckelmann and His Century, to him. Johann Joachim Winckelmann established principles that scholars still adhere to today. The history of archaeology is constantly being updated, but it was here at Herculaneum, against the dramatic backdrop of Mount Vesuvius,